Hi folks, Aaron back with you with Passing Through Productions. I appreciate you watching the video today. This is a cemetery, the very aptly named Old Cemetery in Pulaski, Tennessee. It is kind of a who's who of local politicians, of craftsmen, of the founders of Pulaski, Tennessee. The cemetery was utilized from the early 1820s until the early 1880s, and at that point the cemetery was virtually full, and they moved to the much larger Maplewood Cemetery that I've also done some videos on this channel, so take a look. It also a very interesting cemetery with lots of history. But this is a virtual who's who of the community. 10 former mayors buried here, various tradesmen, farmers, tailors, self-made men and women, children, people of all ages, all here is their final resting place. And for a long time, it sat relatively abandoned and in disarray. Now, this monument here in the center of the cemetery actually has listed people that took part in the restoration of the cemetery that took place back in the late 60s. It also, you can find out everybody that is known that is buried in the cemetery. Now, like a lot of different cemeteries over the years that get neglected, have their markers destroyed, there are some people in this cemetery that they have incomplete or, in fact, in some instances, no records of whatsoever. Now, this had been a sore spot for the community for a long time, the early 1900s, really into the 1930s, that they knew they had to do something about the cemetery as animal bones were strewn through it. It was just in a really horrible shape. People had begun to stop visiting the cemetery, and as it got into the 1950s, 1960s, finally through HUD, a grant through HUD, and through the hard work of the townspeople, it is presented the way it is today. But now, even now, from 1967 till now, you're starting to see that it's really due yet another restoration again. And I would say for sure in the next 15 to 20 years, they're going to have to consider what does that next restoration look like. I love some of the architectural choices that were made in preserving this cemetery and reclaiming some of this green space as well and honoring these founders of the town. Tennessee was in its infancy when many of these people came to the Pulaski area. Many of them born in other places like North Carolina, some in Virginia. And when Tennessee became a state, they came here to mark out their own pathway for Pulaski, for Giles County. And it's nice to be able to come here and remember these people that live so very different lives. Really sad to see when we don't know who some of these people are. We can't quite make out the etchings anymore. We see children who only lived to be a year old and meant so much to their parents, and they carry that love with them throughout their entire life. And now we can see that represented in these markers and memorials so many years later. With the renovation of the cemetery, a lot of these design choices, I love the fact that it really equalizes a lot of people. They're side by side. Yes, we still have some monuments that were salvageable, but for the most part, everyone looks equal. It's just a very serene feeling. Monuments of sandstone, of granite, nothing too ornate. This particular stone here, we can see, unfortunately, there has been some acts of vandalism over the last few years. I have been here before, very early in my channel, to film this cemetery, and you saw a lot of graffiti that I'm so thankful much is gone. You can still tell on some of the stones that there has been something there, but the cleaning process, I think, has been very, very good in this cemetery, and I was happy to see that. It's also interesting to look at the lifespans of a lot of the people buried here, and you get a real sense that mid-30s, early 40s was the lifespan for a very long time. And it's also that interesting gap. A lot of the South, we care a lot about the Civil War history, kind of pre-Civil War right up to it, and then post. We don't think a lot about that time in between, and I think it's a time that we miss. The vast majority of the people interred here passed away prior to the Civil War. That gap of time between the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, and then those rough years of really trying to carve out who the United States was going to be. Really interesting to get back here and just kind of commune with your thoughts. You can see here some of the graffiti that I was talking about, how they've done a good job of getting a lot of it cleaned. This cemetery doesn't get a ton of visitors. Here's more of the graffiti that I was referencing that has mostly been washed out as much as possible. You see even the ancient gate back there that contains some of the material for cleaning the cemetery is in and of itself 60 plus years old now. Thanks so much for accompanying me on this walk through the old cemetery in Pulaski. There are other much larger cemeteries in town, but I really enjoy coming back to this one when we come through and visit family. Just because, again, I know it doesn't get a lot of traffic through it, but it's a really beautiful place. And just remembering the people that came before us, hoping that they would appreciate what we've tried to do. Pulaski, if you do any research of the town, and I have in many different videos, has had a tumultuous history, but it's come out on the other side. It's doing some really great things. It's full of amazing people. And I appreciate you being with me. I've been Aaron. This is Passing Through, and you've been passing through. I appreciate you. Have a great day.